All right. So MEFA is the Massachusetts Education Financing Authority. It was created in 1982 to help people plan, save, and pay for college. It is a nonprofit. The key word here is nonprofit. When you look to get information, try to get that from neutral third parties. Don't just type in scholarships in a search engine or pay for college in a search engine. This being a capitalist society, we have many unscrupulous actors that will look to separate you from your resources. So always go to trusted, not-for-profit, independent third parties that can help you sort a lot of this out, which can be confusing at times. Tonight, we're going to talk about the types and sources of aid. I'm going to talk about the application process, how the financial decisions are made, learning about paying for college, and discovering free, emphasis on the word free resources. There is a financial aid application that you do have to pay for, but other than that, the financial aid process itself, applying for the FAFSA, which is the universal financial aid, is free, as well as looking for scholarships. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. So when I say types,
excuse me, Kevin, if I could just break in for,
sure.
I want to mention that we actually can't see the screen at the moment, or I can't see the screen for a moment. So I don't know if you're, yes. And I just want to let everybody know, sorry, this is Jonathan from MEFA. I'm here answering questions in the chat, that this session is being recorded. I want you to let you know as well. And now I'll pop back into the chat. So thanks, everyone. Thanks.
Sorry about that, Jonathan. Yeah. So I'm about to be 47. You have to forgive me with my my technological dinosaur-ness. I just figured out what TikTok was a few months ago because of some challenge or something. So anyway, so now everybody can see we're good. I can't actually see the chat, but Jonathan is monitoring that. So we're good to go. All right, let me start back from the, okay, here we go. So this was, I was talking about MEFA. I was talking about what we're going to be discussing tonight. And let's see. So, all right, let's dive in because, here we go. So when I say financial aid, it's kind of a misnomer because loans are included as aid when in fact you are responsible for repaying debt. The biggest difference here to remember is grants and scholarship, which is a gift, it's free money. You don't have to give it back. That's obviously the most ideal and the one that everybody wants. However, a lot of your financial aid that you may see when you actually get your awards may not include a lot of it. So the other elements of it, it's still considered aid, even though it's out of pocket. So like federal work study is a job you have on campus, but you actually pay out of pocket before you get to school, and then you're sort of reimbursed through your on-campus job. And then federal student loans, which pretty self-explanatory. The students are the ones that are responsible for the loans. There are student loans that the parents can take out, both federal and private. I'll get to those a little bit later on, but the main point is that the primary difference obviously is the best kind of aid is grant and scholarship aid because it's money you don't have to pay back. So the sources of aid, so grants and loans and scholarships are all kind of the ingredients of financial aid, but they come from different places. So the federal government is the entity that offers federal Pell Grants, that offers federal work study and Stafford loans and Parent Plus loans. You can find all that information at studentaid.gov. We also have a bucket with state money. So the Massachusetts no interest loan, the Mass Grant, the John and Abigail Adams Scholarship for MCAS proficiency. And that information, all the Massachusetts financial aid information is available at mass.edu/OSFA, which is the Office of Student Financial Assistance. Then you have another bucket which has institutional aid, and that's institutional grants, scholarships, and some institutional loans. Most colleges, particularly the well-resourced ones, are going to offer institutional grants and scholarships for their most desirable candidates in their applicant pool. These are not application, the scholarships that colleges and universities have, you don't apply for separately. Just by virtue of being an applicant to the school, you will be eligible to receive any of their awards. And like I said, typically the most desirable candidates for that institution will receive the highest amounts of grant money, like in the form of like a presidential scholarship or award or something like that. And then other agencies, so this mostly like scholarships that you might get through civic organizations, you might get through the parent organization that's through your school district. You can apply through some corporations offer scholarships. I know for years past, 10 years ago, several years ago, when I used to do direct service, help young people look at Verizon, Genzyme. So for those of you working, your employers may offer scholarships for employees' children. So that's something to look into as well. And you can also get information from your school counselor. So for federal student loans, again, I mentioned that it's the student that is the sole borrower. There's no credit check, so that's either kind of a good thing or a bad thing. I would argue, since the loan limits aren't that high, it's not necessarily bad. Loans by themselves aren't a bad thing. It's only borrowing without regard to how much you owe, and then not really understanding all the different ways you can repay your loan successfully or manage it. That's where people tend to get in trouble. So by itself, loans can be very helpful. The limit for a first-year student is $5,500. The limit for a second-year student is $6,500, and then for a third and fourth-year student, it's $7,500. And if you add all that up, you see that the total borrowed for 4 years is $27,000, the maximum you get as a dependent student. The key takeaway from here is that the loan interest rate is fixed every year. So for students, college students right now, in the 2021-2022 academic year, the interest rate is fixed at 3.73% for the life of the loan. Next year, when a student is enrolled for the 2022-2023 academic year, July 1st is when the interest rates may change. They don't have to change, but they can. If they do, any loan made for the next academic year will be set at that interest rate in July. So you can have loans throughout college, all with different interest rates, but they will be locked in. The only way that they will change is if you consolidate, but that's kind of like AP calculus. So I'm not going to actually talk about that today. But you know, consolidation is something that can happen and makes all of your loans one loan, and then your interest rate is an average of all of them. So one thing to keep in mind too is that if you borrow the max, to think about what that means for the total estimated debt between $32,000 and $34,000 if you include interest, as well as what that translates to into a monthly payment. So if it's $27,000, it's roughly $281 a month and change, and roughly $311 a month if it's a little bit higher than that. So when we talk about aid, we also have to clarify the difference between merit-based aid and need-based aid. So I mentioned before the institutional scholarships, particularly the ones that colleges award to their most desirable candidates. So those are going to be merit-based aids. So you have somebody, a student with high academic achievement, the college wants to recognize that by awarding their highest honor, usually full tuition, maybe just tuition, not room and board, but typically it'll say, congratulations on your acceptance, and here's a $50,000 award. The key thing to remember about these types of award, and remember merit can be defined as academic, artistic, athletic, is the award renewable, and is it for 1 year or is it for all 4 years? So if it's, let's say it's $20,000, that could mean $80,000 or it could mean $5,000, because it could be $5,000 a year, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year, and that totals 20. Or it could be 80 because you get $20,000 a year every year, and it takes you 4 years to get a bachelor's degree, so 20 times 4 is 80. One point to remember about this is that it varies by school. So one school may be fairly generous with merit aid and another school won't. And also it's important to remember that merit aid, it's usually contingent upon maintaining a certain GPA. So if you had high academic achievement in high school, they're betting that you're going to maintain that level of academic achievement. And so if you get below like a 3.0, 2.5, then you may lose that merit aid, which would be challenging, particularly if you've budgeted for it and you've gotten sort of used to it. I've been in many painful conversations when the bills arrived, sophomore year, junior year, and the student had to explain to the parent why they did not have the merit scholarship anymore. So just FYI. Need-based aid is primarily how aid works from a federal award standpoint, in that the federal government is going to determine your level of need through the free application for federal student aid. Colleges will also use their own institutional methodology to determine need. The key takeaway from this is that your definition of need is going to be very different from the government and college's definition of need. So disappointment is nothing but unrealized expectations. So when you go into that when you go into the process knowing that there's going to be a discrepancy between, you know, your definition of need and another entity's definition of need, then it can help, you know, bring a little, what's the word I'm looking for? Serenity maybe to the process, like serenity now. So like if you're anxious or frustrated, you know, just recognize that need is a kind of a broad term, and most financial aid is based on need. And you know, it's determined by these variables in these methodologies, and that there's no way to game the system. Just a brief note about like paying somebody to help you with this process, because I've seen some kind of fly-by-night outfits that say, oh, well, hey, fill out your financial aid application with us, and we'll guarantee you get the most money possible. Not really, because the methodology is actually based on certain variables, and the information is actually imported from the IRS. So unless you, no pun intended, fudge the numbers on your IRS tax return, there's really no way. It kind of is what it is. And your demonstrated need is coming from the financial aid application, and it behooves you to fill it out as accurately as possible, because then that gives you a leg to stand on should you feel the award is insufficient, and then you want to talk about how to renegotiate what the school offered you. I mentioned the application process. So the financial aid application it's open right now as of October 1st. The key thing is to remember, don't submit things late. Early action, early decision deadlines can be November 1st, but for regular decision, typically for financial aid, the deadlines are in February. You can use MEFA.org, College Application Manager, to stay organized. I often recommend using paper, manila folders. Like I said, I'm a technological dinosaur, proudly, sort of, but you know, no matter how technologically advanced we get as a society, it's important to keep things in writing and have like documentation. So, and I think from an organizational standpoint, it helps as well. So you can supplement what you're doing on the MEFA College Application Manager or anything on your, you know, mobile device or in the internet, but with hard copies and files. I mentioned the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. This is the financial aid application you use for all schools. Every school that you apply to, you will use the FAFSA to apply for financial aid. It's required by every college. Again, it's available October 1st. The website's fafsa.gov. In order to sign it electronically, you need a FSA ID, a Federal Student Aid ID. It's an electronic signature that both the student and the parent use to sign the FAFSA. I mentioned the IRS data retrieval tool. That is a tool within the FAFSA that pulls the data from the IRS and imports it into the FAFSA. Therefore, it eliminates the errors that used to happen in the past when people would input manually, or even on the paper FAFSA when they were routed in and sometimes make mistakes. The FAFSA must be completed every year. It's not just a one-year proposition. You do it every year. All right, see, we have a ton of questions in the chat, so let me just see, let's see. I'm just gonna pause for a second and see if I can get to some of these questions real quick. Let's see, does annuity, okay, thanks Jonathan for answering that question about annuities. The key takeaways, the thing to remember about the FAFSA is that the FAFSA doesn't take into account like other assets like your home, stocks, anything. It's looking at liquid assets. It's not looking at retirement savings, you know, cash in the Cayman Islands, things like that. I mean, that the profile is the more detailed application that gets into the bulk of a family's financial profile, no pun intended, and resources to really do a kind of, they have their own institutional methodology, which asks for everything. So those are the primary differences. I can answer some of those questions as we go. If I'm applying before early decision, if I'm applying early decision before November 1st, do I need my FAFSA and CSS done before I apply? Typically, if you're applying for early decision, you need the financial aid applications done, although it depends on the school. So I would double check with the school's website. How does FAFSA work for divorced parents? I will get to that right now. Thanks for those questions. What's reported generally on a FAFSA is demographic information. And remember that non-documented students are able to fill out the FAFSA. you may not be eligible for federal student aid. There are some states and there are some schools that award students or provide either in-state tuition or provide additional resources to students that are not documented. So if you're non-citizen, you put zeros for your social security number, and then you have to print the page and sign it and mail it in because you're not able to get an FSA ID. The other information, each school, so when I said that every school requires the FAFSA, it's all for all colleges, every school has a 6-digit school code. You don't have to memorize them like I have in years past of direct service and helping people do the FAFSA. You can search for the school and then you select it, and then the code is attached with the school. So you select the school, you say, am I gonna live on campus, off campus with a parent? And then you add that to the application. And then the information gets sent directly to the schools automatically via the 6-digit school code. The question I get asked a lot is what happens when you apply to more than 10 schools? First, my answer would be, please don't apply to more than 10 schools. You can apply to 8 to 10 and be good. Most school counselors I know usually recommend apply to 6 to 8. Anything more than 10, I mean, eventually you're going to only go to one college. You can't really clone yourself and go to more than one. So the more work you do on the front end and whittling down your choices, the better you'll be on the back end trying to determine which one is the best fit. I've also heard the argument that it helps to apply to more schools because you have more financial awards to compare. That is true. Although, once you get past 10, the variance in awards isn't that great to justify applying to 15 or 20 schools. Also keep in mind, there's usually a $50, $75 application fee. I know maybe some schools have waived it in that application fee in the wake of COVID, but it's still out there. So just keep that in mind. Parent information goes on the FAFSA. So parents, one of the great things about FAFSA is that it is a living document, so it has evolved with the times. And so all married parents, including same-sex parents, financial information goes on the FAFSA. All parents who live together, either married or not. So domestic partners and parents who have been divorced or separated but still live together, both parents' information goes on the FAFSA. In cases of divorce where there's one parent in the household, then the custodial parent is the person who will fill out the FAFSA. If the custodial parent, the biological parent, has remarried, that current spouse, they're now a family. So they're married, even though the step parent is not the student's biological parent, that parent is still required to submit information on the FAFSA, even if they do married filing separately. Legal guardians are not parents. In cases where parents are deceased, or in cases where like Department of Children and Families have stepped in, or through the legal system, the student has been an emancipated minor or granted another legal guardian besides the biological parent, that legal guardian is not a parent and does not have to put anything on the FAFSA. Only the student's information enters into the FAFSA, and the student is then considered an independent student, and as a result can get more in loan limits and et cetera. But that's legal guardians do not do anything and put any of their information on the FAFSA. And I mentioned the methodology and the variables. I'm not going to get into the how the sausage is made, but basically it boils down to what is the adjusted gross income in that last bullet point, what is the number of people in the household, and the number of children in college. That's primarily how the expected family contribution is calculated. So when it comes to financial information beyond the demographic information, both parent and student income is used, taxed and untaxed income, and then parent and student assets. And by assets, it's mostly liquid. The investments in other property is like if you have a property that you utilize for rental income. Do not use your primary home, the value of retirement, life insurance, or the value of a small family business. And debt is not reported except debt on reported assets, such as another property from which you derive rental income. The CSS Profile is the other financial application in addition to the FAFSA. So if FAFSA is universal to all schools, the CSS is for certain independent schools. It's administered by the College Board. So the same, much like the FSA ID, you need a CSS ID. It's the same thing that you use to register for the SAT or PSATs. And they're required by some colleges, not all, and it is a cost associated with it. So whereas the FAFSA free application, emphasis on the word free application for federal student aid, the CSS profile costs $25 for the first school, $16 for each additional school. Like the FAFSA, it's available October 1st. The key difference is that the non-custodial parent in cases of divorce is required to submit financial information and demographic information in a separate application. So the way it works is that the student will complete and the custodial parent will complete the profile. When that process is done and when the student hits submit, it will generate a non-custodial profile for the non-custodial parent. Often I get asked the question, well, what happens if the parent is not available or indisposed, or the family does not know where the non-custodial parent is? Those are situations to work out with the individual colleges. There's actually a space in the profile that you can actually write your special circumstances. And it can be about the family situation, it can be about finances. One topic that comes up frequently is families who send money to relatives overseas. There is a question that sort of gets at that, but not to great detail. So that provides an opportunity to answer a little bit more, to elaborate on that in the supplemental questions, before the supplemental questions. And usually what happens with not being able to locate the non-custodial parent, schools, if there's an notarized letter from an independent third party, like clergy, non-for-profit, where the student has been engaged, or somebody can attest to that fact, then typically schools don't really draw a hard line. In the past they might have, but I think, again, much like I've mentioned that the FAFSA is a living document that evolved, financial aid offices have evolved with our understanding of complex family dynamics. But the main point is, if you do need to contact the school, do so in writing and then set up a time to have a conversation. All right. So after you apply, what ends up happening is when you send the information to the schools, they get it all electronically. So the FAFSA, all the schools that require it have a 6-digit federal school code. And in the FAFSA, they have a 4-digit CSS code as well. You don't have to do anything other than hit submit, and then the information goes along the electronic superhighway to the schools. You will receive a student aid report. Basically, you have an acknowledgement that you completed the application successfully, which is then followed up by a summary of what you did and a summary showing what your expected family contribution is. Or now, I think the term is now SAI, Student Aid Index, but that's the same thing. It's what you will be expected to pay for the one academic year that's upcoming. Again, like I mentioned, you contact the financial aid office with special circumstances. And colleges may review applications and determine the application award. So this is why it helps to have that other documentation. If the college requests it based off of things that you entered, typically usually in the profile versus the FAFSA, then you have documentation to validate some of the numbers that you put into the application. Colleges usually verify data on financial aid applications. Obviously, it's a random process. They did pause it during COVID, that there was a kind of like the moratorium on student loan repayment. There was a moratorium on verification, which actually streamlined the process a little bit. But just the main takeaway from this is that this is not like an audit. They don't have like an IRS has auditors. They're not trying to catch you in mistakes, and they're not severe harsh penalties if you make errors. It's more to verify, because think of it as like a sliding scale on how they award financial aid. And so they want to make sure that they're awarding correctly within the right parameters. And if you fall in certain parameters, then you're eligible for these types of awards, right? And if you fall outside those parameters, well, then you may not be eligible, you may be eligible for other things. And so it's more of like, verification is kind of a loaded word. It's more of like, correct matching, making sure that the information they have is accurate so that they can match what they have with the correct award. Financial aid offices in years past were not the most friendly places, and I would say that that reputation was well deserved. I mean, from my experience and my personal opinion, it's like they're girded for battle, because they're expecting, hostile people being like, well, why didn't you give me this money? Or like, why are you so stingy? Or why is this happening? And they're, they go into it, unfortunately, thinking that it was going to be confrontational, and many times it was, but I think they've had consultants over the years help them understand that, like, rather than raise the temperature, understand, mutual gains, negotiation, importance of effective communication, hearing people, helping, people understand, and just not taking for granted that just because the information is on the website, that people read it and understand it. Financial aid, I often say, is like a language, right? Like, even, if you're college educated yourself and you've been to college, can be very challenging to decipher the acronyms, to understand the terms, understand the rules, understand the language. And so, over the years, colleges have both made their in-person offices a little bit more welcoming to current students, and then have also been more sensitive about carving out enough time to be able to answer families' concerns. Like, to them, they're answering the same questions all the time, but they have to remember, for a lot of people, they're coming at this for the first time, and just need some information to help. So my advice to you is, when you contact the financial aid office, kill them with kindness. These 3 words, help me understand, will do well to kind of like, level set and frame the conversation, because, you're just coming at this from a place of, not like, why did you do this or why did you do that, but like, help me understand, how does this work? Help me understand. Here's what I understand. Because you will receive more assistance, and not make it a confrontation where it's like you're at loggerheads, versus how do we find a solution? Because the colleges, they want to help. I mean, they may do it a little bit awkwardly, but ultimately, I think they try to help to their best ability. And so when you do that, when you engage with them, just keep that in mind, because it's challenging, and it's an emotional process, right? I mean, it involves your children and involves money, like 2 highly emotional things. So you mix those together, it can be really challenging. So how financial aid decisions are made, like I said, your need, and I'm going to get to that in a second, but remember that your need is not like what you think your need is. So the way the formula works is, we look at what is the entire cost of school. It's not just the tuition, it's fees, it's room and board, it's books, it's supplies, transportation, and personal expenses. So we kind of, the way that the colleges work it out is rolling everything into the cost of attendance. It's what are your direct costs and what are your indirect costs. And all of those together equal your cost in attendance. So your expected family contribution is what, after you fill out your financial aid, the FAFSA, what is the number that the system spits out that determines you can pay for 1 year of school? What can you pay for 1 year? The same federal formula is applied equally across the board. Unfortunately, it does not take into account cost of living. So the adjusted gross income of a family in Greater Boston, San Francisco, and New York, which has very high cost of living, is counted in the same manner as a family like in Omaha or Boise or someplace with not as high cost of living. It's just mainly echoes a philosophy that the onus is on the family to pay, and it's not necessarily what you will pay, but it's how the award is constructed with these two variables. Your EFC will be lower when you have multiple kids in school. So remember, I mentioned at the beginning that you have. Hang on, sorry. Sorry, I'm actually in my son's video gaming area, and he was like, "What? I need to get on and do this battle." So whatever. Those of you with kids who play video games during the pandemic a lot of the rules went by the wayside. So I think it created a monster, but it's all good. It's all good. He'll eventually grow out of it, right? But getting back to what I was saying about the number of people in your household, a lot of times families think, well, I'm not going to get anything because I make X. But if you can make X, have 5 people in your household and 3 people in college, and that the number of people in your college, the number of students in college is weighted and impacts what your EFC will be. So you can look at, there's lots of calculators online. You can go to MEFA.org and look and get a ballpark. Those of you that have, juniors or, sophomores that are just beginning to look at this process, you can kind of use it to get a ballpark number for what you can expect to pay. So I'll go back to the chat for a little bit because it looks like we have about 18 questions. So let's see. All right. Don't worry about your son. Yeah. All right. Speak the truth on gaming. Yes, I do. Good night. Wow. Telling you. All right. Thanks, Jonathan, for doing this so well. Jonathan looks like he's covered a lot of the questions. So somebody asked, how does my son actually apply? Does he go to the website? Yes, you go to the website. The FAFSA is at fafsa.gov. The profile has its own website as well. So these are online applications that you complete online, and then you use your ID or PIN to electronically sign. There exists in the virtual space. The application, the information gets sent on to the schools, and you don't have to do anything else.
Kevin, I wonder if I could break in.
Sure.
Somebody asked a question earlier that I said I would raise with you, and they wanted to know if applying early action would hurt their chances at negotiating financial aid.
Jonathan, why are you doing this to me? That's all right. Okay, so I'm going to be brief. For those of you who have more detailed questions about early action, early decision, find me offline. Early action is different from early decision. Early action means that you can apply early, get your decision prior to the end of the calendar year, and then wait until May 1st, 2022 with the rest of everybody else that applied to college to make your final decision on where you will matriculate in the 2022-2023 academic year. The advantage to early action is that it gives you time to compare financial aid awards from many other schools and determine which is the best fit financially, right? So there's no advantage or disadvantage in applying early for financial aid and applying early to admission. Early decision is binding. I'm going to use binding in air quotes, but I'm not going to explain what I mean by that right now because we don't have the time. But early decision is binding, meaning that if you get accepted, you will go to the school no matter how much you get in financial aid. So typically the way that it works is that what's the unspoken part about that kind of contract is that you're not applying for financial aid, or you're applying for financial aid with the understanding that whatever you get, you'll get, and that you'll go to the school because it should, in theory, be sufficient if the school is awarding you correctly, according to them. Where it gets to be a little bit sticky is that early decision, you withdraw your applications from other schools, so you're not able to see what financial aid offers would come from other schools so you can compare and say, is this the right fit? Now, you may, from an early decision standpoint, think that, okay, this school's the right academic fit and the right social fit, and I feel at home and I'd love to be a member of this community next year for this, that the student says that, but financially doesn't make sense. And I just, in my professional opinion, it always helps to have options because, I like to help people have choices that lead to more choices versus to limit their choices, which then can limit options later on down the road. So bottom line is early action, there's no impact. I don't know, I don't want to say that. It's hard for me to say the impact about early decision because when I was in admissions, it was like 20 years ago and the landscape has changed a bit. I can say that my experience in admissions and early decision is that the students who applied for financial aid and who said, it's kind of a long story, but basically, if you're not confident that you can just write a check for certain thousands of dollars, then you may want to rethink your strategy for applying. But I'll put my email in the chat right now for everybody. So if you want to reach me, I will answer your questions about that offline. Okay, excellent. Let's see. Thank you, Jonathan, for answering the question about FAFSA ID. So let's see. What income will they use? So the question is, what income will they use for the financial aid application? So in years past, it was always the previous calendar year. So for students that are entering for the 2022-2023 academic year, they would have used 2021. But now we've moved back 2 years, so they call it prior year. So you use 2 years back worth of data. So the income information will be pulled from 2020. Now, obviously, with the pandemic, there's going to be great variations in what people might have made, 2019, 2020, 2021, et cetera, going on. The FAFSA only takes 1 year in that snapshot. And so when financial circumstances are different, and man, this is why it's important to have documentation and be able to articulate your particular situation, because the numbers may not reflect your reality. And similarly, those of you, especially, I live in Arlington, those of you that live in Greater Boston and own your home, your property values may make you appear to be more, like you have more resources that you can put towards college than you actually do. And so that's kind of the challenge of the profile, is that they take into account your home equity. They ask you when you bought your home, what your purchase price was, what's left on your mortgage, what's the current value of your home. So that's usually what kills people sometimes, because the private colleges will look at you to use your home as an ATM, and to basically be like, oh, well, you can borrow against your home 1.9, HELOC, lock it in and just keep those checks coming. Again, my professional opinion, I don't know that I necessarily would leverage my home to pay for undergraduate. I might think about using those resources differently. There's other ways to invest in your child, either helping support either through a graduate degree or through helping him or her or them buy a condo and have property in their 20s. So they can establish that foundation from which they can build their future. But again, that's another conversation. I'm happy to have that with people offline. All right. Thank you. So Jonathan's doing an excellent job with the chat. Let's see. So I see somebody that says, my EFC was almost exactly the same with 2 students in college as when one applied. What went wrong? Looks like Jonathan is helping you with that. For specific issues with the FAFSA and EFC, the helpline has gotten really, really good over the years. And so I think it's 800-433-3243. But the helpline to FAFSA, when you call in and you have a completed application, you can review it. Usually people are really, really helpful in helping you sort that out. So this is another resource you can utilize. So just getting back to, so we have about 20 minutes, getting back to the financial aid formula. So cost of attendance minus your EFC equals your need, your financial aid eligibility. So I think we're using different terms now, because demonstrated need is a misnomer again, because what you think your need is different from what the federal government and colleges think your need is. So a better way to think about it is, what are you eligible for? And colleges award you based off of your financial aid eligibility. So they take the cost of attendance, which again, direct costs and indirect costs, minus the expected family contribution, and that's the number that's spit out through the FAFSA, equals your financial aid eligibility. So let's take a look and see how this works in action, right? So let's say the college costs all in, everything is $45,000, okay? So tuition, fees, room, board, books, et cetera, et cetera. So your EFC is $5,000. So when you filled out the financial aid application, at the end of the FAFSA, they said, you know what, John and Jane Doe, we think you can pay $5,000 towards your student's education. So in that award, you may see that the college gives you, for 1 second, let me just move this bar. The college gives you $17,500 in a grant and $10,000 in a scholarship. So that's a pretty substantial award. That's $27,000 of free money. That's great. So if you then take that and then you're eligible, this is the amount that you can get as a first year dependent student, $5,500 in a federal Stafford loan. And then you add in federal work study, that's another $2,000. Now, if you add all these things up in the middle, right? That's 27.5 plus 5,500 is 33, then plus $2,000 in work study is $35,000. Now your unmet need is $5,000. But the way to look at this is to say, okay, what do I have to actually bring to the table? So the way I look at it is, if I had a college that cost $45,000 and I looked at a financial aid award that gave me 27.5, I would say, you know what? I need to bring 17.5 to the table, because yes, I have 7,500 of that in aid in a student loan and work study, but those are costs that I'm going to have to come up with. And the loan will be factored into given to you as a credit, so you don't actually pay that out of pocket. That will be dispersed in at the fall semester, 2 disbursements, one in the fall, one in the spring. But the work study is a job that's first come, first serve. So if you have a student that is, shall we say, maybe not early bird gets the worm and sort of waits to the last minute, they may find themselves out of luck, because it is first come, first serve, and schools have a limited supply of resources of work study funds. And I would look again, like the unmet need, your EFC. So for definite sure, you're going to have to come up with $10,000, right? So there's a gap between what the school offered you and then what you have to come to the table with, okay? Unmet need in your EFC is the family's responsibility. You can use net price calculators on the school's websites to sort of like get an idea of what your EFC will be, and then take what the cost of attendance minus your EFC and get a ballpark for what your out of pocket cost will be. The one thing I would caution though is, when you look at the net price calculators, the colleges will include merit-based aid in them. And to me, that's kind of like best case scenario, because I remember it was a school in LA, Occidental College, that said, the student, it cost like 74 and change, and then the student got $47,800 in financial aid, and it was like, yeah, you got this $30,000 merit scholarship. But what they don't say is that if your applicant pool is 5,000 and you only give out 4 of those scholarships, like those are pretty steep odds. And so I would just follow up. I'm not saying that net price calculators aren't good. They can help you establish a ballpark, but it's important to follow up with the school to then ask, if it's not detailed on the school's website, how many merit awards are offered each year, right? And how big is the applicant pool? Basically, you're trying to get an idea of like the percentage, because let's say they offer 100 merit awards of $5,000 each, or they offer not all financial aid is awarded is equal. So they could say, well, we have $5 million in financial aid, but it could be like very few gifts of a large amount of money, or it could be a lot of gifts of a very small amount of money. So those are the things that you want to, follow up with the school about. The key thing about this slide is to remember that awards can vary. So don't just look at what your unmet need is or the total of the financial aid. Because in these scenarios, if you look at college A, college B, and college C, the total awards, it's great. $40,000 for college A, $33,000 for college B, and $25,000 for college C. And if you look at college A, you can say, well, that's the best because my unmet need is 0. The cost of attendance was 45. My expected family contribution or EFC was 5,000. So I'm eligible for $40,000. Wow, college A gave me $40,000. Score. That's awesome. But don't look at unmet need as the sole criteria for how an award is constructed, because in this case, all the awards are the same with regards to unmet need. The total is the same at $35,000, and your unmet need is the same, right? So in that case, what do? You look at the college that offers the most in free money. So college A is once again the best award, not because it has zero unmet need, but because it offers the most in grants and scholarships, roughly $28,000. College B is second best, and College C is the absolute worst. Why? Because it has a $30,000 parent loan, and they put that in the financial aid package to show you that your unmet need is $5,000. Without going into great detail, because we only have about 10 minutes left, I find this action utterly deplorable, dubiously, like ethically dubious, and just morally reprehensible. Like there's no college that should put a $30,000 parent loan in a financial aid award letter. That's not aid. That's how a family can finance, but parent loans have higher interest rates than student loans. And it's a flaw in the system, because you could have an EFC of 0. So, let's say, for example, the cost of attendance is 45, your EFC is 0, meaning the government determined you have no ability to pay. The college, technically the thing about Parent Plus loans is that it allows you to award up to the cost of attendance, less whatever financial aid you got. So if you got no other financial aid, the school could give you a $45,000 plus loan and say that we met your financial need. And they could give a $45,000 plus loan to somebody with no income, that's literally on public assistance and has no ability to pay for school, but yet they can get a $40,000 loan. It's a flaw in the system that schools, unethical schools, in my opinion, exploit, and one I'm working feverishly to eliminate. But until then, you have to put on your wise consumer hat and be able to, again, like I said, learn the language of financial aid, decipher these award letters, because they don't all use a common language. It's another area in which I'm trying to advocate for on Capitol Hill. But colleges are resistant to that, and it's going to take a while before that happens. So be very wise, mindful consumers. The thing about paying for college that I really want to emphasize is that when you see a gap in what you're offered in financial aid and what the school costs, your immediate thought should be, how do I cut that in half? So let's say you have, let's use round numbers again, like you're applying to a school that costs $60,000, they gave you $40,000 in financial aid, and you have $20,000 left over. Rather than think, you know what, I'm going to borrow $20,000 to make up for the difference, and then now junior can go to school this year. I want you to think about, how can you cut that in half? And the way to cut that in half is to think about your resources from like the Scrooge, Ghost of Christmas Past, present, and future. So past income, present income, and future income. And by past income, obviously that's savings, anything you have in the bank. The key thing is, obviously you don't want to blow the entire savings on 1 year. And this is where I see families run into problems all the time. You get fixated on, how do I make this work for 1 year, without remembering that it usually takes 4 years, sometimes 5 or 6. I only took 4, but sometimes 5 or 6, no judgment, to complete a bachelor's degree, right? And so if that's the case, then think of it like this. Like, let's say you have $16,000 set aside. You want to take $4,000 of that for 1 academic year. The student has $4,000 put aside for college. You take $1,000 of that. Okay, that's your past income from the student and the parent. The total is $5,000. From your present income, you want to say, okay, you know what? I can probably out of pocket pay $500 a month if I split up some of this over a monthly payment. For a nominal fee, you can enroll. Schools have what's called a tuition management plan that allows families to split up the cost over a 9 or 10 month period. So in this case, you're splitting up $5,000 over 10 months. You have $500 a month. And then now, between your past savings and your present income, now you shave $10,000 off that $20,000 balance. So now when you go to borrow, let's say you borrow $10,000. Now over the course of 4 years, if all things remain the same, you're borrowing $40,000 versus $80,000, which again, you're going to pay more over the life of the loan with interest. So having a much lower amount means you're going to pay less in interest. And then it also may help you kind of reevaluate, okay, well, do we really want to make this kind of investment in an undergraduate degree when in fact the student has demonstrated interest in pursuing graduate study? So because keep in mind, the value of the bachelor's degree, in my opinion, has been somewhat kind of inflated. Yes, there's statistics that show you earn $1 million more in your lifetime. But I think there's a stronger correlation between a student's economic trajectory and professional trajectory with graduate degrees versus a bachelor's, and especially bachelor's that were obtained at a very, very high cost. We are in this region in Massachusetts and New England sort of fortunate to have so many colleges, but also the unintended consequence of that is it skews our idea of what college is. And the high density of private liberal arts colleges sort of kind of skew people's idea of how it works. And, you know, without going into great detail, I met a student several years ago at one of the hyphenated schools in our area, Acton, Boxborough, Lincoln, Sudbury, Concord, Carlisle, Dover, Sherburne, Whitman, like the ones that, you know, right? Like 99% of students go on to four-year schools. I met him and he said, hey, you know what? I'm going to Middlesex. And I was like, really? Why? I mean, I'm happy for you. You're going to save a lot of money, but what prompted that decision? And he was like, well, my sister is now 26. And she's living at home. She can't really afford to live on her own. And she went to a private school within the area. And she was like, look, you know, I had fun, but if I had to choose between living independently at 26, living at home, living independently at 26 and going to different schools and saving a lot of money, I would have chose that over, like, you know, having the college experience on a dorm at this campus that was probably 10 minutes from my house every day of the week. And so after going to Middlesex, he transferred then to UMass Lowell to complete his degree in engineering, and he got his bachelor's from UMass Lowell. And, you know, who knows? I haven't followed him on LinkedIn. I'm not sure what he's up to now. But my guess is that he is independent at 25 versus still having, you know, to deal with some of these financial obligations that limit his choices. And remember, I said in the beginning about choices. You always want to create opportunities that lead to more opportunities. And think of it as the funnel. So you want to be like, you know, going up through the funnel where there's a ton of choices versus coming down in the funnel that's like limiting your options and narrowing your path. And actually, that's the first bullet point. Wow, I didn't even synergy. I didn't even look at the slide before I clicked on it. But you know, starting at community college does save significant dollars. And those of you that travel for work or traveled prior to COVID, I often asked, you know, parents in the audience, it's, you know, talk to colleagues from different parts of the country about like where they're looking at college, where they went to college themselves. You'll find that many successful professionals will have started at two-year schools, will have gone to state schools and think nothing of it. And again, just for perspective, the entire state of Indiana has like 60 colleges, and the city of Boston has 60 colleges, right, within its limits. And so again, it kind of skews our view of like what we think of college and what we think of as a quality college experience. And I would ask you to challenge your assumptions on that, right? Especially as we're moving into an era where the bachelor's degree is seen less as a credential and more as a sorting mechanism that has excluded people from the labor market. And there's tons of investment, both from private sector and states, to think about how do we help people who have some college either finish, or how do we help people develop their skills without necessarily degrees. And corporations are sort of stepping into the fold and saying, if you work here, we'll help you with school. Like there's lots of ways to think about education and acquiring skills beyond, you know, going to like a leafy, you know, campus and hearing the professor play guitar on the quad and you know, all these things that we associate our generation with, you know, the college experience. So think about, like, again, total enrollment, total debt. Think about the number of kids you have in college. How many parents have I spoken to over the years who have multiple kids, like 3 or 4 kids, blow the budget on the first, and then, like, you know, you say, okay, kids, well, those of you that are left, there's a YouTube tutorial on how to educate yourself on Philosophy 101, or they'll pop in a video of Good Will Hunting and, you know, see Matt Damon. You know, you like those apples? Of course, I'm dating myself, right? But, you know, getting an education with, you know, Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States and all that. The point is, have the conversations now, because having a conversation about where you're going to look at school is a lot more than just like, what do you like the best? Where do you feel the most comfortable? And what do you think is the best academic fit? It's academic fit, it's social fit, and it's financial fit. All those, it's like a 3-legged stool. Any one of those things are not there, it'll collapse. Look at the return on investment. I mean, I think, unfortunately, we've gone past the time where you could go to college to kind of explore, try things out, change your major 5 or 6 times, and then kind of like experiment. Now we really have to look at a return on investment. Since college has outpaced inflation, 8-fold, depending on who's measuring, it's really important to look at that ROI and look at the correlation between what you think you may want to study and what you may want to do, and work backwards. People who are working in the industries that you think you may want to be in, the power of the internet, LinkedIn, online, connect with people and say, hey, can I have 15 minutes of your time? Talk to me about your career trajectory. I guarantee you 9 out of 10 people, professionals, will de-emphasize the brand name school and talk more about like how you can, ways you can be involved in the career that you're interested in, and connect with people to sort of see, is this something you actually will like doing? And also the individuals who are working in the fields that your students are interested in can tell you, yeah, you know what, I thought it was X. Actually, my job is really this. People that watch, courtroom dramas think it's all about like arguing in front of the judge like Atticus Finch, when in fact it may be a ton of paperwork and constant billing that you may not be up for. So again, challenge your assumptions, have these conversations now. The worst thing that can happen is signing on to go to this particular college, and then when the bill comes around July 1st, you're like, what are we going to do now? And start looking for scholarships. So paying for college in Massachusetts, the free options, again, mass transfer, transferring from a 2-year school to a 4-year school, and then tuition break at New England's colleges for certain schools. Those of you driving on I-93 North might see the billboards for like UMaine and say, go to UMaine for the cost of what it is to go in-state to Massachusetts schools. It can be dependent on major sometimes, or it can be just an incentive that public universities throughout New England are trying to use to recruit students, because some states are losing population. So in addition to wanting an educated citizenry, they're also concerned about, well, where are our students going to stay here after they go to college here? Because we're having some issues with our population, losing population. Free resources, National FAFSA Day. So there are events that are held in October through February, offered in both English and Spanish. You can register at FAFSAday.org. And there are educational opportunity centers throughout the Commonwealth. You can go to massedco.org. Those websites right there on the screen, you can go to find out more information about that. At both of these locations, there are financial professionals who volunteer their time. In the case of educational opportunity centers, they're actually employees who get paid. But for FAFSA Day, they're volunteers, typically people who've worked in financial aid offices who want to help families with this process. So again, free resources, free help. Anybody who's looking at entities out there that are charging for getting the best, package possible, they are not good actors, in my opinion, and you can get help for free at other places. The important thing to remember to stay on track is just, looking at it as a timeline, as a continuum. So if you are a junior, your goal over the summer is to nail down your college essay. That's the most important bullet out of all those. Yes, you can visit colleges, you can look at them virtually, online, campus fairs, college tours, things like that. But nailing down your essay and feeling confident about that is something you want to do before you set foot in the door senior year. The fall senior year, you can retake the SAT standardized test if you choose. Remember that many schools are going to test optional and that there's no penalty for not taking the test. The winter of your senior year, you obviously can submit your financial aid applications, your admissions applications, applying for private scholarships, and you send in your mid-year grade reports. And then in the spring of your senior year, you will receive letters of acceptance to admission, as well as financial aid award letters. MEFA also offers after the acceptance webinar, which helps you deconstruct financial aid letters, and then give you advice on how to manage potential costs, and then think about, again, in a global context of what your larger financial goals are as it pertains to either caring for older parents yourself, thinking about retirement, and then paying for kids that aren't in school this cycle and what that means. Again, you can go to mefa.org, tons of resources, the EFC calculator, and the college admissions and financial aid timelines. So what you can do now, before I get to any last questions, you can get the financial aid FSA ID for student and parent. You can actually go online to start your FAFSA. It was available October 1st. You can also do the profile. You can go to mefa.org/events and look for other webinars. There's blog posts. Again, anytime you get information, neutral third parties, you can also go on the school's websites. They tend to just put it all out there, which can be kind of confusing because you have to sift through a little bit. Whereas places like MEFA sort of help you, are sort of your kind of your guide, and can, again, neutral third party advice. They have no stake in the game other than to see you be able to plan, pay, and save for school successfully. And so great people, I've known them for 20 years, and nothing but positive things to say. You can connect again online, either Facebook, tweets. Actually, Facebook changed their name to Meta. I wonder how that's going to go over. That just was announced today. LinkedIn and YouTube. And yeah, so MEFA College Planning. I put my email in the chat. I'm just going to go to questions right now real quick to see what Jonathan did not get to. Jonathan did an amazing job. Thank you so much. He posted the slides in the chat. So those of you that, I get that question a ton, can you share with me the slides? They've been posted in the chat earlier, probably around 6:45. Let's see. We answered the question about divorced parents. If you're currently separated, thank you. Let's see. So if you're currently separated but not divorced, you can email me offline. Typically what's happened is people, again, if you're filing taxes from 2 years ago that doesn't reflect your current situation, the IRS is going to import it as married filing jointly. But if you're divorced, then you're only going to put the custodial parent. There's a way to make corrections to a processed FAFSA that you can do when it's already done to then reflect the new current reality. What is your younger child? One thing I want to mention, there's a question about younger children who will be in college. When you fill out the both financial applications, but particularly the profile, a lot of times, families will be like, well, why doesn't the college, take into consideration that I'm paying for, independent school for my younger son, or that I have other kids along the way? They don't assume that those kids will go on to college. You may have 3 kids in your household and only 1 in college, but the way the methodology works is they don't assume that the other 2 are going to go. I mean, maybe they win The Voice, or maybe they made American Idol, maybe they join the service. So those possibilities preclude the colleges from accounting for that in their determination of your what you're eligible for and your need. Again, it's kind of challenging, but you do have an option in the CSS profile to write if you're paying for educational expenses for kids younger than the current student who's going to go to college, and that can be factored in. All right, let's see more questions. Can I listen to the recording another time? Yes, it's being recorded, so you can listen to it. Let's see. If you have 2 other kids in private schools, I did answer that question. Adoptive parents, yes, are treated as biological parents. Thank you for answering that, Jonathan.
I'm going to post the slides again because some folks said they do not see them, so I'm posting those again.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Sure.
Let's see. Outside scholarships. Yeah, so in general, the one thing I would say about outside scholarships is that think of it as a bullseye. You get the most points for hitting in the middle, or in archery. So look locally first before looking at national awards. So when I say local, that you can go through your schools. Usually the school counselor's office will have a list of scholarships for that particular high school students. The town may have an education foundation that offers scholarships for residents of the town. Again, your employers. So if your employer offers scholarships for employees' children, they may offer it, if, for example, you work at Verizon or Delta, it might be open to students nationwide, or it may be for students in the local area. So, and then you look at scholarships for Massachusetts residents, and then you can search nationwide. Again, you really want to emphasize on that on the local first before like applying for national ones, and then just increases the odds. More questions, keep them coming. Let's see. Thank you, Jonathan, doing such a great job. Slides, yes, we shared those.
A good one here. Somebody just asked if a parent is also a college student, how is that reflected on the FAFSA?
If the parent is in college, then the parent is a member of the household and is included as one of the people that will be going to college. That is correct. Yes, thank you for that question. So at the very end, when you put how many people in the household will be in college, and again, it's at least part-time. So if the parent is taking one class, that doesn't count. If the parent is taking 2 classes and is enrolled at least part-time, then yes, that counts. And yes, you can include that as a member of the household that will be in college. Excellent question. All right. Let's see. Can I flash pages 7 and 17 for half a minute each? Yes, I can do that. So let me go back to page 7 and 17. Let's see. Come on, technology. There we go. Page 7. All right. So this is 7, slide 7. Again, these are the sources of financial aid that students get. You get it from the federal government, from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. You can get money from individual college universities, as well as other scholarship agencies, MEFA Pathway, FastWeb, School Counselor. If your school uses Naviance, you can get scholarships through that as well. So that is slide 7. And then 17 was, after you apply for financial aid, these are the things that happen. The key thing in here is if you have special circumstances, you are well within your right to contact the financial aid office for assistance. And please repost slides. They did not appear. Jonathan, did you get that? Someone said the slides when you posted them in the chat didn't appear. And somebody said I was incorrect and it said to exclude the parent. So I do not want to give incorrect information. Correct. So my fault. What I was implying, when the parent fills out the financial aid application for him or herself, they include the parent and the student as people in the household that will be going to college. When the student is applying, the student does not include the parent. So thank you for correcting me, because I was incorrect. If a parent who is going to college is applying for financial aid, they include every member of the household that's going to college. If the student is applying, the student only includes the student. Thank you for that clarification and proof that even subject matter experts can be incorrect. So thank you.
Seems like some folks see the slides and some do not. I'm not quite sure why that is. Regardless, I think maybe it would be best to just say that you will be getting the slides emailed to you tomorrow. But I can try. I mean, I can try and post them again. But
yeah, I mean, it's a 3 megabyte slide. Yeah, it's right there, 7:36 p.m. I see it. You posted it, but yeah, maybe people didn't get it.
If I can too, there's one other question that I saw that I thought was interesting.
Sure.
And it is someone who's filling out their 3rd FAFSA, and this person's EFC came out much higher than even her AGI. And she said, I believe when I transferred data from the IRS, it found my 401k rollover and counted towards accessible assets. I tried to correct it. So yeah, I don't know, but I just thought you might have a recommendation for this person, a general one.
Okay, can you repeat that? What was that, John?
Yeah, so this person was filling out their 3rd FAFSA. Mm-hmm. So it's the 3rd year. The first 2 years, well, the 3rd year, basically this most recent year, her expected family contribution came out to be way higher than even her adjusted gross income. and she thinks it's due to a 401k rollover.
Right. So was the rollover, but see, the thing is, was the rollover included in the AGI? I've seen IRA distributions sometimes included, like, so you have wages, salaries, and tips on the 1040 form. And then before it calculates the AGI, it takes into other things like lottery winnings, rental income, things like that. And if there's a spot for distributions from retirement accounts, and if they were a one-time thing for 1 year, it can be counted because it's included as the adjusted gross income, and that's the data point that gets put into the application, if that's the case.
So they should talk to the financial aid office about that?
Yeah, usually, I mean, it's the opposite like of a debt bomb. So it's like an income bomb that comes in that makes you look for 1 year, like your adjusted gross income is all out of whack. I've seen it most of the times in cases I've seen it where it's been property transfers or property sales. Like I remember one case in particular, a woman had a home in South Boston, and when South Boston real estate was just booming, she had sold it. Now she was actually on disability, but because like the property value was so high, it looked like on her adjusted gross income, she was in the stratosphere. And so the college had to award according to the letter of the law, but was able to provide her with other resources because that money, like she didn't actually, it went into like a trust. And so, and then in years subsequent after that one, income bomb, the next years reflected her true status, which was she was on disability, and then was awarding accordingly. So that person can, whoever had that question, feel free to email me offline for those specifics about that, because it is unusual. Usually, I mean, any sort of mistake in calculation is not so much from the EFC, but because the income ends up being, there's like an extra zero, or it's not accurate, which can then yield an unusually high EFC, particularly if you have multiple kids in school. Hopefully you can't hear that screaming and the dog upstairs. Hopefully just I can hear that, but yeah. All right. Okay, anybody else with any other burning questions? Because we're at time, I want to be respectful of people's time. I actually could stay down here a little bit longer and avoid the chaos of upstairs. I have a soon to be 14-year-old, it's gonna be 15, and then a 12-year-old. So I guess I'm out of the, like, I mean, I really feel for people with like toddlers who are going through like trying to work from home and having toddlers who demand like constant vigilance, and who don't binge. On some level, I cringe at my kids binge watching stuff either on their phones or whatever, but I'm like, hey, that keeps them occupied. But I don't know, I do kind of miss those days. Actually, you know what? I can post a picture of my they'd be super embarrassed. I can't do that.
Yeah, this session is being recorded, so
yeah. All right. Yes, you're right. They don't want to be. That's why I'm not running for office too. My son asked me that the other day. He's like, "Why aren't you running for office?" I'm like, "You don't want to be on TV. Come on." So, all right. Okay. So I think, I mean, let's see, how do we get the ID? So FSA ID is the website we mentioned in the beginning. Go back to that slide for folks. FSAID.ed.gov. And FAFSA.gov is the website to complete the FAFSA form. It is available now. Must be completed every year. So, all right. Jonathan, do you see any more on your end?
No, I think we're good.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Good luck. And thanks for joining us. Have a great night and a great holiday season. Take care.